Hello, I'm David Caputo, Professor of Political Science at Pace University in New York City, and I'd like to welcome you to another lecture in our massive open online course, the MOOC, called Road to the White House. In the prior lecture, I talked about how the Republicans select their delegates and how the Republicans allocate their delegates to the National Convention on a state-by-state basis. Today, I want to talk about how the Democrats do so. The Democrats have a larger number of delegates to their convention. They have 4,763 delegates who will be eligible to attend the July convention. Therefore, if you want the Democratic nomination, Senator Sanders and Secretary Clinton are both seeking 2,382 delegates. And that's really what this is all about. It's not whether you win or lose primaries, it's how you do in terms of delegate count. And both of them are doing everything they can not to overlook any potential delegates. But what I want to do today is talk about how the Democratic Party has decided to allocate the various numbers of delegates to the states and also to some other non-voting entities. So let's begin by talking about what the Democrats do. This is very different than what the Republicans do, and it is equally interesting. Both are interesting ways to do so. The first thing that Democrats do is they determine what they call the state Democratic vote. So that is what was the raw number vote, total number of people voting for President Obama, in this case a Democratic candidate, in 2012, and also for President Obama in 2008, and also for John Kerry, Senator Kerry, at that point now Secretary Kerry, in 2004. So you divide those by the total Democratic vote across the country. Therefore, if your state voted more heavily Democratic, you're going to come out better on that measure. Then they also add to that, okay, what they're calling, this is part of the allocation factor. This is one part of it. The second part of it is you take the state's electoral college vote and you add together 2004, 2008, 2012. Let's just say a state didn't have any change because of the 2010 census, had 10 electoral college votes. Therefore, you have 30, and you divide that by the total number of electoral college votes, which is 538. Okay? And that gives you a number also. And then this leads to an allocation factor. You take 1/2 times the first measure, the state Democratic vote, divided by the total Democratic vote, plus the state electoral vote divided by the total electoral vote in the United States. Okay? So, and therefore, you then take that allocation factor by 3,200. In this particular case, if the allocation factor times 3,200 leads to any sort of a fraction, if it's over 0.5, it's rounded up. If it's 0.5 or below, it's rounded down. Okay? Then the step is, once you decide, once you know how many delegates the state gets, you then give the state 15% additional delegates. Okay? And those 15% are for the party leaders and elected officials. Party leaders and the PLEO. I'll sometimes refer to them as pledged local and elected official. These are individuals who get the opportunity to be at the convention, and they're normally pledged to a candidate depending upon what happens in the primary and the caucus. Okay? Then, after you've done that, you then divide the delegates then, that total number of delegates, into whether they're at large or whether they're selected in districts. And for the Democrats, they select 75% of their delegates by district, in most cases by congressional districts. There are other possibilities, but most states use congressional districts. And 25% are at large. So what does that mean? Well, it means in a primary that you may win the state, but you could lose the number of delegates if you don't do well in all the congressional districts. So that is something to remember in terms of things. So then in addition, the Democrats have an interesting set of bonus. Remember we talked about the bonuses that the Republicans gave in terms of who controls various aspects of the party offices and so forth. All right, the Democrats give bonuses which apply to the number of base delegates. Okay? First bonus is if a state starts its selection process from April 1st to April 30th, they get a 10% base bonus. If they do it 15%, okay, they get a 15% bonus if they do a cluster. In other words, if they start the selection process and the selection process is on the same date as neighboring states, i.e. almost a regional primary, and they get a 15% bonus. And if you start your selection process from May 10th to June 14th, you get a 20% bonus. So what the Democrats are doing here is emphasizing and giving bonus points to the parties in the states that start later rather than earlier, which is very interesting to think about. Okay? So now let's give an example here. Let's say a state has 20 base delegates. Okay? They then would get and they get a starting bonus and a cluster bonus. And that means their total bonus would be 35%. Okay? So 35% would be 7 additional delegates. These would be assigned 75% to the at-large total, and 25% to the at-large total and 75% to the district delegates. Okay? So keep that in mind as we go through the various primaries and caucuses going forward. Now, the Democrats also do something similar to the Republicans, and they provide jurisdictions without electoral votes or assign base delegates as follows. American Samoa, Guam, and Virgin Islands are each given 6 at-large delegates. Democrats abroad assign 12 at-large and 1 pledged party leader and elected official. And Puerto Rico is given 44 base votes. Okay? Even though none of these actually are voting in the general election for president, they do have the opportunity to participate in the nominating process. Okay. Then step 5 for the Democrats. This is very important and something that should not be overlooked. Remember, I talked about the fact that the Democrats also assign party leaders and elected officials per state. These are pledged during the during the debate and so forth. Okay, 15% during the nominating process. 15% of the base allocation are assigned to party leaders and elected officials. Okay. Now, however, step 5 that the Democrats use is they go to a total of 712 unpledged party leaders and elected officials. Okay, they're chosen by the positions that they hold. So for instance, if you're a member of the Democratic National Committee, you're automatically a delegate to the National Convention. 432 there. 47 Senate members. 193 House of Representatives members, 20 governors, distinguished public officials such as ex-presidents and so forth. These are the so-called super delegates. They go unpledged and they are not bound by any primary or any caucus. They vote, quote, their conscience. Now, why is this important? Here you have 712, okay, and remember the total I mentioned at the beginning. You need 2382 to be nominated. Almost a third are going to be the superdelegate selection, their particular casting of their ballot. This is the reason why it is so important for a candidate to do as much work as possible with the superdelegates. Now, and some of the polling that's been done, superdelegates have been polled, and to date, Mrs. Clinton has an overwhelming lead. Well, this is important because she may have as many as 500 to 600 delegates that she has going into the convention. It has nothing to do, the selection of those delegates has nothing to do with what happens. So clearly Senator Sanders is going to do everything possible to show, look, I'm the winning candidate, I can do better, you need to back me. So what happens with these superdelegates, okay, is very important. And what it really symbolizes is the Democrats' effort to make sure that the party leadership retains control of the nominating process. So many people are critical of the superdelegates. Other people feel that superdelegates help to have party cohesiveness. Now, let's go, if you recall when I did the Republican examples, I used Texas and New York. Let's do the same for the Democrats. Let's go with New York first. New York's base allocation, remember that formula? You can go back and calculate it if you want, but you should end up with 197. Okay? And then New York gets a 10% bonus because its primary in April is after, it's in the second tier of start date, so they get a 10% bonus. That gives them an additional 20 delegates. Okay? And then when you add in the pledged and local officials, 15% of 197, that gives you 30. And then the superdelegates. New York has 44 superdelegates. That gives you a state delegation of 291. Okay? So if you go back and work through that math, I think you'll be able to follow it. Now let's look at Texas. Okay? Now here you have a state that is much less democratic, okay, in terms of their voting patterns. However, in Texas you get a base delegation after the allocation factors applied is 193. And then you get 15% of the base, which gives you another 29. Okay? And then you get 30 unpledged for a total of 252. This would be the superdelegates. Okay? So you can see 291 for the Democrats in New York, 252 for the Democrats in Texas. Go back and check the reverse of those totals for the Republican side. So the Democrats are rewarding states that are more democratic than states that are not. They're also rewarding larger states than smaller states in terms of their allocation of delegates. Now, how each state selects the allocation of who and how they're going to assign these delegates, okay, and pick them is really up to each state. And that'll be a separate lecture, which I'll come to in probably about a week or so to bring you up to date and explain to you that it's really up to each state as to how this is done. So this concludes the allocation process. And I think it's very interesting to watch to see the Democrats are larger in number, Republicans smaller in number, but reward stronger Republican performances in terms of holding elective office. Thank you.